You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.
Hello, hello, and welcome out there in podcast land or on a YouTube channel. If you are watching us on YouTube or listening to us on your podcast platform of choice, you have reached Johnny Has the Keys, a little show that Tim and I put together about 4 years ago now. And we cover horror, science fiction, movies, television, sometimes literature, key references in those films and the things that they later on reference. If you are just joining us for the first time and just found us, thank you. We appreciate you finding us and hope that you'll give us a good review or a good check or subscribe to all that fun stuff. If you're returning, thank you for returning. And we hope that we're continuing to satisfy your appetite for horror and science fiction. Tim, how you been? What have you been doing?
I am great. It's good to be back. I feel like we've been off for a little while, and
it does feel like that.
Yes.
Well, you're rejuvenated because you came back from the mouse. That's why you're
I did. I went to the House of Mouse. It was very hot, and you still had to wear a mask, so it was very hot and humid, for lack of better words.
Humid.
Yeah. Yeah. I love Disney. We knew it would be a challenge, but I don't know that I want to go back there with the mask mandate. I think I'll wait till that's lifted.
Oh, okay. There you go.
It's a little hot walking around the park for 9 hours in a mask. So
yep, it would be. It would be definitely.
I'm definitely pro mask. I just not pro wearing one 9 hours in hot.
Well, what have you been doing other than mousing? Have you done any genre-related things?
Actually, I have. I told you a while back that I've been checking out the TCM app and watching as they add movies. I've learned by looking daily that they add them alphabetically, so they repeat and not always a lot of new stuff. I wish they would grow that database. Mm-hmm. But I did catch one that was on our list of movies. And I'm glad I caught it because it really doesn't belong there. Where is my little picture here?
For those of you listening, Tim is supporting us with audio-visual pictures in his background.
Yeah, I caught Night of the Hunter. I had never seen this movie.
Yeah, Robert Mitchum.
It's always been garnered as a very scary serial killer movie, and I thought, well, this might be a good one to put in our selection, and now I'm glad that I didn't, because it's very tame by today's standards. I could see where in the day it may have been as powerful as like In Cold Blood. I don't even know if it's that powerful, but but there are some visual elements of it that I like. He is a killer. Shelley Winters is in the movie. He kills her after he marries her because it's a long story. I don't know if you remember it, but he meets her husband in jail. He knows the guy stole a bunch of money and that his kids know where the money is. So when he gets out of jail after the guy is executed, he goes and marries the woman, Shelley Winters, and starts terrorizing her kids to find out where this money is. And he kills Shelley Winters and becomes their father because they're married. They didn't want him in the first place. And the reason I bring that up is there's some really cool imagery of her in a car at the bottom of a lake, and she's bound, and he had slit her throat. That image will always stick with me with this movie.
That's
so I
good.
can see where that may have affected people.
Yeah.
From a horror perspective, but it's not a horror movie. And as far as serial killers, it's not really that either. So
I remember it was to me, it was more sort of like, because I remember when I finally saw Cape Fear, I think it's Cape Fear, that it reminded me of that. It was that kind of thing where it was more like a guy terrorizing the family than it was a like a serial killer, typical current serial killer movie, sort of thing. It was more like a murderer more like a Hitchcock story than a serial killer, Silence of the Lambs sort of thing. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And ironically that you say that, Charles Lawton directed this movie. He's an actor, and he never directed another movie. This is the only movie he ever did. It is very well respected, and Robert Mitchum has said Charles Lawton was his favorite director. So I don't know what that means. But like you said, wasn't Mitchum in the original?
Yeah. Cape Fear.
Cape Fear and Gregory Peck, maybe. I can't remember.
Oh no,
who
but
the
think
other
so.
guy was.
Yep, possibly.
But I mean, I remember the remake more with Robert De Niro.
De Niro and Juliette. What's her name? Lewis, yeah.
Juliette Lewis. I can't remember who the guy was. Anyway, here we are off in classic Hollywood.
Hollywood.
But anyway, I do recommend it. It is a good movie. I do not classify it as a horror movie, though.
Well, you watched something really old, and I watched something really new. I finished the Shadow and Bone Netflix series. More of a fantasy thing than anything. Not really falls into either of our genres, but it's in that teen, young adult fantasy realm. It was getting a lot of hype on Netflix, so I thought I've got to see what this is like. And actually, was not terrible. Wasn't great, but wasn't terrible. Definitely wasn't as good as everybody's saying it is. But it was compelling. It was a very good world building, like incredibly good world building, like almost like Game of Thronesy kind of world building. Basically, you have a continent, let's say, that is divided into like 4 or 5 countries, and we're following the adventures of a group of people in one country. These countries in the north and south, east and west, kind of, are separated by this huge black void of mist that separates literally the entire continent. And they're in a pre-industrial world. So they're in basically we have rifles kind of thing. We have limited steam engines is the kind of era that it's in. But years and years and generations ago, some evil sorcerer created the Black Rift, which is this great big rip literally down the continent. And inside it are all these monsters that live inside it. And you have to try to brave getting across it to the other side, and then you can go to the other side, the other country or whatever. But these countries are also at war, so they're constantly trying to figure out ways to get through the rift to attack each other. And into this also is you essentially have 2 armies in this country we're following. You have the first army, which is basically the grunts, the guys with the weapons and everything. And then you have the second army, and the second army is composed of people who have developed magical abilities. So some of them can fly, some of them can do telekinesis. They're all Wandas. A lot of them are female, but they can do different things. They can control mind, they can control matter, all that, and they're part of the second army. And it's a mini series, so it was about 8 episodes. It had extremely well done characters, but the plotting I didn't like at all. The characters were really cool.
You said it was young adult. Would you classify it as fantasy or horror? Or
no, it's fantasy. It's fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
The horror monsters you would really like. The design of the monsters is really good. The world building is really good. The characters were really cool. It's just I did not like the plot at all. It was very simplistic. It was very storytelling. It was very, we have the young heroine who doesn't realize that she has this secret hidden ability. Suddenly it comes out. Now she has to learn how to control it. And actually, she's a lot more powerful than everybody thinks she is. And it's just very easily predictable all the way down. But like, you've got the heroine and the villain and the army people on one side, and then over here you got this collection of this gang. Essentially, you've got a girl who's a trained assassin, a gunslinger type who's a very rogue womanizer kind of guy, another guy who's their boss, who's very cryptic and quiet and everything else, and they all form like this henchman gang that are hired to go abduct the heroine. We need her because she has the secret magic power. So you guys, I'm paying you 1,000,000 kroika or whatever. Go kidnap her and bring her to me. And yeah, it's very Russian based. If you look at it, all the production design is like early turn of the century Russia, like the czars. All the costumes, they have the big fur hats, everything. It's a very unique kind of production design.
Interesting.
But yeah, I would, if I were you, I would give it the first 2 episodes and see what you think. But it's on Netflix.
And it's Shadow and Bone? Is that
Shadow and Bone is the name of it.
It sounds familiar. Is it based on a book?
I think it's based on a series of books. And at first I thought they were comic books. You know, it was going to be like, the Stephen King's Sons thing, the Key, Lock and Key. You know, I thought it was going to be, it's going to be like that. Mm-hmm. But no, it turns out that it's a novelization. It's got like actually 5, what does she call it? I looked it up online. She has the trilogy, which is what this one's based on, the first book of the trilogy. And then she has 2 that are only 2 books in a series. What do they call that? A duality? She calls it something weird, like a duality or a dualization, a dualism, something. It's weird. But anyway.
She made it up.
It's fantasy. She made it up.
Well, I don't know. I'm over all this young adult crap. Ever since Twilight and the Hunger Games.
Oh, it's where everything's coming from.
I know. And the thing is what makes it young adult? Because from a writing perspective, they're pushing these things as far as they can, because it's going to make the kids enjoy them more, because it's taboo. That's why we used to go out and find the books they told us not to read when we were young.
Mm-hmm.
So when does the young adult become the adult? It's going farther and further as people produce them into mainstream, just regular adult fiction. Do you see where I'm going at with this?
Yeah, but to me, young adult is almost exclusively, at least my experience with it, is almost exclusively a young female heroine.
I'm thinking of like things that would, like the rating system. Like, can they use the F word? Is there sex in the book? Is there nudity in the book? That kind of thing. I haven't read them. I don't know. But I'm assuming they do. And they are going that way.
Not well, see, because I read all of the Hunger Games, and no sex in Hunger Games. Okay. Love, but no sex. I mean, there's, same thing with Twilight. I mean, they do have sex. She ends up having a baby, but it's not like a sex scene sort of thing. And that's
Vampires
the 4th
can have
book.
Babies now.
Yeah, no, you don't want to go there. You really don't. And they sparkle.
Babies.
No, you don't want to go there.
Okay, well, no, I was just curious because I was wondering what makes it young adult. Obviously, it's censored somewhat from.
Well, to me, it's a fantasy world. It's a fantasy world. And that can be science fiction too, because you've got all those Divergents too that are dystopian, and they're young adult. Hunger Games is dystopian,
right?
But it's a fantasy genre. It's a young female or young female hero story all the way through. It's usually got that chaste, unrequited, or definitely unrequited love sort of thing, or a love triangle, almost like even this one had a love triangle, whereas you kept thinking this was a love triangle. I mean, she was in love with this one guy, or he was in love with her. No, they just have a platonic relationship. But this other guy's in love with her, but she doesn't like him, and she likes this other guy, but he doesn't like her. So it's that kind of thing.
And there's no sex.
And there's no sex.
Where in reality there probably would be, depending on their age.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
If you're
15 or
teens
16,
nowadays, you're already sexting and everything else. So,
Okay.
But yeah, so I would recommend you look at it just to see the fantasy elements of it, because again, the production design I think you'll really like, and I really think you'll like the characters, especially the criminal characters are pretty well defined. It's a pretty good story from that angle.
I see.
But I mean, because the characters are memorable, and I think that's a good segue to our characters are memorable as for today.
Well,
What do you
yes,
think?
and also youth. We're
Well,
going
yeah,
to be talking about
definitely.
youth of the 1980s. We are in my horror world, and we are
Mhm.
going back to the exact middle of 1980, that is 1985, to a little movie called Return of the Living Dead. Zombies!
Again with the zombies.
Zombies, but a very unique kind of zombie that we really haven't seen that very many of. This movie, wow. Well, let me give you a brief synopsis of it. It's about a group of punks, one of which has taken a job in a medical warehouse. And this medical warehouse happens to be next to a funeral home. And as the guy is training from his superior, I can't remember their names, Frank
Frank and Freddy.
training Freddy.
Mhm.
He tells him about the story of Night of the Living Dead and how it was really a true story, and that it was some kind of toxic gas that the army let get loose. And coincidentally, they're sitting on some canisters that were accidentally shipped to them from the army and have been down in the basement for quite some time. These two bumbling characters, I guess you would describe them as, accidentally leak this gas out. One of the cadavers that's in the refrigeration unit of the medical warehouse comes to life, and they can't kill it because, unlike most zombie movies, even a blow to the brain will not kill these zombies. You have to cut them up and burn them, which is what they do. They call their boss man, played by Clu Gulager, his name is Bert, which is funny because there's a Bert and an Ernie in this movie.
Yep.
This is a little bit of a comedy, by the way, folks, if you didn't already guess.
A little bit.
Yeah. They cut this corpse up and they burn it. The smoke goes into the atmosphere. It makes the clouds rain down upon the nearby cemetery where Freddy's friends, the punks, are waiting. The dead rise, and all chaos ensues.
Yep.
This is a great movie with a lot of history, and we'll get into it. Do you remember the first time you saw this movie?
I remember seeing it on VHS, so it was that long ago.
I could have sworn we saw this in a theater together.
I think we may have, but I don't think it was the first time, because it seems like I remember the comfort of home watching it for some reason. I don't know. But maybe not, because I've seen it so many times.
I have to. Yeah.
I mean, between you, Steve Rowe especially, and then, showing it to other people and everything else, it was just a unique, I still think it reigns as a very unique little film. The way it was, not just the history of it, but just the way it comes across. I watched, in doing research for this, I watched 2 different documentaries about it. And in one of them, they actually talked about when they first read the script, they didn't know what it was. Is it horror? Is it comedy? Is it, but I don't understand, And I think that's, and it was the editor later on in the documentary, the editor was saying he didn't know the tone to give the movie until Dan came in with his cigar and everything else and sat down and said, here's what we're doing, because he really didn't know what tone the movie was going to take, because some scenes were like literally hilarious. And then it's followed by a really gory, creepy, sort of scene.
Right.
What about you? You think you saw it in the theater with me?
I think I saw it in a theater. I thought it was with you. It may have been with Roe. It wouldn't surprise me if it had been with Roe. I know
dead people screaming.
Exactly. Dead people screaming. There's another one in the basement. He's all black and slimy.
He's all black and slimy. I'm
Um,
gonna bust it in the head.
Yeah, this movie has a lot of great catchphrases. It has a lot of great music. It has a lot of great character actors in it. I mean, this movie has a lot going for it.
It does. It does.
The birth of it is what is a little confusing to me. And in all of my research, I really didn't find out much. I just know that John Russo and George Romero made Night of the Living Dead.
Correct.
I don't know if they had a disagreement, or a parting.
They did. They had a legal parting of the ways. They kind of wanted to go do their own things. I think both of them kind of wanted, as much of the IP rights as they could get to go forward and do other movies, knowing that they probably wouldn't be working them together. It wasn't they didn't like each other. As a matter of fact, I saw one documentary.
That's what
Russo says, I like George. As a matter of fact, I asked George if he wanted to produce this movie before I even shopped it around. And he said he didn't. He was doing his own thing. He wanted to do his own thing. That's fine. He said,
I read that George didn't answer the phone calls because they wanted him to be a producer on it.
Yeah. And but according to this interview, Russo still had contact with Romero up until when he died and everything else, or when Russo died. But
and their agreement was that you can do your thing with the words living dead and I'll do my thing with the words dead.
Correct.
So George went on to do, all those other Dead movies, whereas Russo did this and then whatever sequels it spawned.
Right. And even because the movie was in development hell for quite a little while. And what happened was Russo had the idea for this script for Return of the Living Dead, using the living dead because he had gotten legal rights to use that phrase, living dead.
Right.
George couldn't. He worked with Ricci on doing the screenplay for it. They shopped it around and nobody really wanted it. Nobody liked it. Nobody really wanted to do it and everything else. He turned it into a novel before the movie.
Makes sense.
Kept shopping it around, trying to get it, everything else. It wasn't until Dan O'Bannon came in and actually took the novel and the original script and wrote his own screenplay that it finally found a producer. And the producer, it's so funny watching the interview, the documentary, because the documentary one of the documentaries I watched was longer than the movie. It's like 2 hours and 10 minutes long.
Oh, that's awesome. I wish I had seen that.
You can find it.
I watched the director commentary with Dan O'Bannon. And that's why I kept saying, let's hear about Russo. Let's hear about Russo. They never say a word about Russo at all.
Well, this is interesting because this is the other side of it then, because as a matter of fact, and you can find it on YouTube, look up Living Dead, Return of the Living Dead documentary, and you can find it and watch it. It's really good because it has Russo and the entire cast. Everybody in it is interviewed, Clu Gulager, James Caron, all of them. And the only person that's not interviewed is Dan O'Bannon because he died before they did this documentary.
Oh.
So it was really interesting to see their point of view on it. But because, they all liked Dan, but they also knew that he was in way over his head. I mean, he'd always wanted to direct since Alien, but this was his first directing job, really.
Right. And from what I understand, it was a serious script with Tobe Hooper directing to be filmed in 3D until he left to go do Life Force,
yes,
which we know is a stinker.
Well, and they go into a little bit more of that detail. So actually what happened was they found this producer guy, and he was I think he was a realtor. It sounded like a story that happened to Wynn and I in the early 80s, but they basically found this realtor guy who had a bunch of bucks and a bunch of contacts who wanted to do a movie, but he'd never done a movie before. So he hired, he bought the rights from Russo. He hired Tobe Hooper. They were going to do this movie, yada, yada, yada. Tobe Hooper went over to England to do Life Force, and it got delayed by like 4 months while he was doing stuff in England. So he couldn't do it and had to drop out. And that's when they got Dan O'Bannon, who had written the script. And Dan said, well, I'll direct it then for you. And this guy had no idea how to produce a movie. So he said, oh, yeah, sure, whatever. as long as you put my son and daughter in it and my wife and literally. That literally
that
happens.
happens a lot. We know that.
Well, in the backstory, according to this documentary, was Dan O'Bannon didn't want to do that. He didn't want to use the kids and or the wife in the thing. So he went to the makeup guys and said, okay, they're going to be on set tomorrow morning. I want you to call them in at 5 a.m., even though we're doing a night shoot. I want you to call them in at 5 a.m. I want you to put them in the itchiest, most uncomfortable prosthetics you can come up with and
That's
just
horrible.
do that. And so he had them do that, and then he had them wait all day. And then at the very end, at night, like at 2 a.m, when they were finished, he said, sorry, we didn't get to your scene today. So you'll have to come back tomorrow and we'll put you in. And they never came back. So he didn't have to worry about it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a director story. Anyway, but yeah, it went through a lot of turmoil.
So mean.
Went through a lot of turmoil trying to get produced, mostly because a lot of people just didn't know how to market it, how to sell it, what it meant, what the tone was, all that. Because O'Bannon added all the humor to it, even down to the ending. That ending is not in the novel or the original screenplay. That was Dan O'Bannon. The army ending. But like you said, the movie, although it had a first time only. What? Did you freeze?
I was just going to say, you mentioned Rudy Ricci was one of the.
He's one of the writers.
I
yes.
don't know.
Rudy Ricci is
Right.
one of the writers.
He actually still had a relationship with George because he's one of the bikers in Dawn of the Dead.
Well, the
Did you know
last thing
that?
I saw was once they ended up greenlighting the production, and this is after Toby, before Dan, before production, the other producer for Night of the Living Dead, Rubenstein,
Richard Rubenstein.
Yeah, he sued John Russo and said, now you can't make the movie, blah, blah, blah. And Russo was going, what are you talking? And it took like 4 months for them to actually get through that litigation and finally say, no, yeah, okay, yes, you can go ahead and make the movie.
Okay, I want to know that story because he had a relationship with Romero with Tales of the Dark Side.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if he thought, you know what, I just want to keep anything from detracting away from George.
Could have.
Interesting.
That could have been interesting. But yeah, watch that documentary. I think you'll see a lot of cool stuff to it.
Well, I'm glad this film got made because this film belongs out there. It's really, sequels aside, I couldn't tell you anything about the sequels. This movie alone is just a very unique entry into the subgenre of zombie films. For people out there that want to know records, or not records, I guess, but trend setting. This is the first fast zombie movie. A lot of people think it's 28 Days Later, but the zombies run in this movie.
Oh no, I think this setups. I think to me they are keys because they are referenced later on in other movies. But this was the first one that had fast zombies. The first one had zombies that actually talk.
Exactly.
Zombies talk.
That's
the zombies
weird.
have personalities. They're not just shambling. They have their own unique personalities, and they're plotting. They hide and jump and run, and it's, I was thinking, and one of the actors in the interview in the documentary said, I really wish these had have been George Romero movies because these zombies scare the shit out of me as opposed to George Romero zombies.
Yeah,
and
it also started the whole eating brains thing.
Yes,
instead
brains,
of just eating flesh.
Yep.
Which to me, I don't know, it's kind of stupid. Isn't that what iZombie does? That's actually a key, probably too.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But it filtered down. That key went backwards because there are people to this day that still say that Night of the Living Dead, they're eating brains, and they're not. They're just flesh eating. So
right.
But yeah, it had a complex history to finally get Dan O'Bannon's vision on screen, and I think it is his vision all the way down to all the stories you hear about struggles on the set or with makeup or everything else.
But I think it's a good film for a first-time director, don't you?
Oh yeah. I think for a first time, it's great. For a first time producer who didn't know anything, for a first time director who had done Alien though, so he knew scary
Right.
and obviously had a great sense of humor. I think it's very well directed. I think there are certain production value things that don't work for me in places, but I think it overall is a great horror movie. That I think it's a good intro horror movie. I would recommend this to people who, oh, I don't like scary movies. Watch this because you'll laugh as much as you will be scared. You know.
Before we move on into like casting and stuff, do you want to talk about scenes that stick out?
Oh my
There's
gosh. There's so many in this. I mean, the whole structural thing of, you know, you go what 7-8 minutes before you even have the credit sequence.
And the credit sequence is like, what would you call it? A
montage. It tells the story.
It's where, damn, I can't think of the word I'm looking for. It's where he makes the smoke that goes up into the thing like a character. And it tells the story as the credits are rolling. Look, the smoke's going up into the air or whatever.
And great music. That, you know, kind of thing. And both the credit sequences, the opening credit sequence is really cool. The ending credit sequence is like watching the movie and fast forward. And I can't remember. I was racking my brain. If anybody out there listening or watching thinks of one, let us know, because I was trying to think of, is there any other movie that's done that? That basically, it's not showing bloopers. It's essentially showing key moments of the movie in order from the very beginning all the way through the ending credits.
Yeah. You mean the movie lied?
You mean? Well, any scene that James Karen in is great, even down to his character's death in this.
Oh my God. I went to bed last night and Dennis was watching an episode of The Golden Girls and James Karen was in it. I was like, oh my God.
Perfect.
I just watched him in a movie.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole the whole opening with Frank and Freddy and just the way he does it, you want to see him, you know, and he's so facially expressive, all that. Definitely
the scene with the corpse coming out of the locker and just heading straight for Clu, even though he's furthest away and they're closer, it goes right for him.
Oh, the yellow cadaver.
The yellow cadaver. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then it's like, well, you got to get him in the brain. And he takes this giant pickaxe. I have never seen an effect like this to this day. It still makes me cringe seeing him put that pickaxe in the back of that guy's skull.
Yeah.
And there's no cutaway.
It looks great. It looks great.
It's just pinned to the floor and still moving. The pickaxe has got his head stuck to the floor and the body's still moving.
Yeah, that's another first for this, is the whole Romero thing of shoot it in the head doesn't work. Every piece of it stays alive and still fights.
So what do? They cut the head off and the body gets up and starts running.
It starts running around. Yes. That scene, that's another one. Of course, the full frontal naked girl dancing on the cemetery. I watched it, 8 times just for that.
And that is Linnea Quigley,
yes,
Scream Queen extraordinaire.
Joe Bob Briggs'
there's a big
favorite.
Story behind that too.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know.
The scene where Bert goes, Ernie's going, "What's in the bag?" And Bert takes that pause, and you can see in his face he has no idea what he's going to say, and he goes, "Rabid weasels."
Rabid weasels. You can't burn them. That's cruel.
Yeah, take them out back and shoot them. Yeah. That's good. You can't go again. A lot of my favorite scenes are associated with particular lines. Send more paramedics is a hilarious little double entendre line.
It's great, and I didn't realize it until I rewatched it. But that actor's voice sounds a little Boris Karloff-y to me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree with that. I hadn't thought of that,
Heralded.
but that's a really good one. Yep.
Yeah. And then another one, of course, says send more cops.
Yeah. The whole scene with the half corpse girl, old lady, zombie.
Yeah, a lot of the scenes that stick out in my head are the special effects ones.
Yeah.
And that is one of them for sure.
It's a great puppet. It's well done. I still have the problem I have with all zombie movies, which is how can they talk? They don't breathe. And in this one, how can they not only talk, how can they enunciate? They have no lips.
It makes the pain go away.
Yeah, right.
The
Tarman
pain of being dead.
Tarman's a great design and well
Yes.
done. I like that.
I love the scene where, and it's really an easy effect. It's like something I think you would have done in a movie with the melting face when the gas is leaking out of the canister.
Yes. My key for that was definitely back to Raiders of the Lost Ark again.
Right.
It's that whole look,
thing.
the wax face melt. And I read that, because they show it, it's that shot and it's during the opening credits. So it's as the gas is escaping, but it melts off and leaves half the skeleton and everything else. And the glass cracks. Mm-hmm. It wasn't supposed to. That was a total accident during when they were filming.
Beneficial accident.
Yeah, and they kept it.
I read that too. I'm trying to think of other scenes. I mean, I love the punks in the cemetery, like you said earlier. First of all, the music. I don't know any of the bands, but I own the soundtrack because I love the music in this movie.
I saw that online, but like 3 different people said that exact same quote. Said I had never heard of any of these bands before, but this is one of the best soundtracks out there. It's great,
right?
And he used a lot of punk music.
Trash is talking, and the guy goes, "Hey, everybody, Trash is gonna take her clothes off again." She just pulls that off, and Linnea Quigley is going around naked. You mentioned that earlier. She ends up doing like a dance in front of on a thing. They all have flares, and she's dancing.
Yeah.
And did you hear or read about the problems they had with that naked shoot?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like she wanted to do it totally nude. So she did it nude, and they said, we can't have pubic hair. So they made her shave, and it looked even more perverted because Dan said you could see everything once she had shaved. Mm-hmm. So they had to make a prosthetic to look like her groin area. So she never was actually nude. She was dancing with like a prosthetic on.
Right. Yeah. They essentially, it's exactly the story, and she even talks about it in the documentary. It was the producer who came in while they were shooting it, and Dan was loving it, everybody else was loving it, and the producer went, "No, you can't show that on a movie. You can't do that." So they went and shaved her, came back, and then he said, "Oh my God, now it's even worse. You can see everything." So the makeup guy ended up having to make her something that they all described as she looked like a Barbie doll, because it covered up everything.
Right.
But she's naked for the rest of the movie. It's not just that scene. She doesn't put clothes back on. She, she falls in the water and gets her fantasy nightmare of being eaten by a bunch of old men.
And really the only crime is the wig she has on, because it is terrible.
Yeah, the wig is not good, which is interesting because there was a big deal about the makeup artist, because they fired their makeup artist 2 weeks into the shoot, by the way.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they only had a 5-week shoot. But 2 weeks into it, they had to fire him because everything that he was doing just wasn't good enough. And, his first yellow cadaver, they didn't like. He didn't deal with hair well. So they had to take everybody to a hairdresser who then did all their punk haircuts for them and all of that. The other backstory was, the other girl, the one with the blue hair.
Party girl.
Party girl. She was originally, Dan O'Bannon wanted her to be Trash, the Linnea Quigley role, because she was really a stripper.
Right.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm tired of taking my clothes off. Let me do the party girl because I know how to party.
Yeah. Right.
There's your character motivation.
Yeah. And then there's the geeky sort of Brad Majory kind of guy that doesn't seem like he belongs in this clique at all, but he does sort of, I guess.
I can't remember. What is his name? Chuck, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other dude,
let's see if I've got a picture of them in no. I thought I had a picture of them in the car where they're all together.
Casey was the party girl, and that it used to be a stripper, and she was supposed to be Tina, who's the lead, who's Freddy's girlfriend. And Tina dresses like she's getting ready to go to Cyndi Lauper's church or something, you know? I mean, wait. And that was a trivia thing I heard on the documentary. First of all, they kept putting her, because in the script, she wears a plastic miniskirt is what Tina's supposed to wear. But the girl playing her said, that doesn't sound like Tina. I don't like that. Blah, blah, blah. She didn't know.
So when they were going, motivation.
But the guy that plays Spider, who's hilarious, I forgot his name.
The black guy. He's actually Puerto Rican, but I think he's playing a black guy.
Yeah, Miguel Nunez. He actually wore that exact outfit in one day to their rehearsals, because they had a week or 2 weeks of rehearsals before this. Dan O'Bannon insisted on it, and they all say that's why the movie has the character that it has, is because they had 2 weeks as a group to rehearse, to do theirs. The only one that didn't was Clu Gulager, because he was literally hired the day before they started shooting.
They had, I'll get to casting in a minute, but they had some issues casting that part. That guy Nunez that you mentioned that played Spider was actually homeless when he got cast in this movie too, which I found fascinating.
But he showed up at one of the rehearsals wearing that outfit, the white pants, the white shirt, everything. And she goes, that's what Tina should wear. And so they went out and bought that outfit for her. And that's why she wears that goofy looking, I'm going to church tomorrow outfit, you know?
Every character in this movie is good. I mean, there's really nothing bad character-wise. If there's anything that's a little lesser, it would probably be that Chuck character you mentioned, and maybe the ingenue.
Well, Chuck gets gets one of the coolest deaths, though, because he gets that whole squirt all over the wall death, right? Isn't that Chuck?
No, that's Scuzz. He has a mohawk. He gets bit by the half lady. Chuck doesn't. Does Chuck die? Chuck may be in with Clu at the end when the bombs are dropped.
Is Chuck the goofy one? The Brad Majors?
Yeah, the one that's like got his head shaved on the side.
But he's wearing the suit. He's wearing
that's
he's with Casey in the he's with Casey when the bomb drops at the end. So right. And who's the big guy's Suicide? That's
Suicide. That's Mark Venturi. I read that or Venturini. I read that he, I think, died young.
He did. And in the documentary, they talk about that. He died of leukemia and uber young, like before 30.
Yeah, something like that.
They talk in one of the documentaries about him. And the fact that he was such a great guy and very funny and very fun to be around, even though he was like 6'6",
and he's like giving this speech, you know, about how life is or whatever, and the whole time naked Linnea Quigley is squirming on him and grabbing his crotch, and I'm like, how in the hell is he doing that?
Oh yeah,
and not breaking character.
And she said in an interview that I saw with her that was her favorite scene, where she goes,
yeah.
I just love fucking with him. It was great. And trying to, I was going, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was one of the few people that didn't have a mohawk. Like 3 of these guys have mohawks.
Yeah. In some
Party Girl
form.
kind of does. Scuzz does, as does, well, I
Spider.
guess you would say Suicide has almost a reverse mohawk. It's short and just got strips shaved.
Yeah.
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 And
And
the
we
guy
haven't-
that played Scuzz, Brian Peck, the one that you were talking about that gets bit by the half woman and sprays blood everywhere.
Yep.
He also did the voice of the half woman.
Mm-hmm.
Pain of being dead speech that she gives an explanation to why they eat brains.
Well, he did the voice on the set. It's not the voice you hear because they dubbed it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
He
did the voice. He when I was watching one of the documentaries, he has a lot to do with it. I think he may have even produced that documentary. But it was very interesting because he reminded me of the way you and I would have been on set. He just got into everything. He helped out the makeup guys, and he talked to the grips and all this. And he obviously got really good friends with Dan O'Bannon. So he was like dubbing in for the old woman's voice and doing all this. So he just had a ball doing the movie. And yet I haven't seen anything he's done since then.
Right.
I
don't know that I looked to see what he had done. I did look what some have done. I think Thom Mathews is still working. James and Clu are dead, obviously, as is the guy that plays Ernie, Don Calvo, I think it's his name.
But James came from pedigree. He had done Poltergeist before this. So
that's right. He's the realtor. I forgot about
that.
Yeah.
You moved the tombstones, but you left them
move the
bodies. Yeah. So he's the villain essentially in that piece.
He is. He is.
Thing.
But he was also a big like Western actor.
Oh yeah.
And as was Clu Gulager or Gulager. I always said that name wrong.
Well, and Quigley, Linnea Quigley was in everything in the 80s. I mean, she was in I think she's got like 100 movies.
Well, it's because she was not afraid to do nudity, and she kind of embraced the whole Scream Queen thing with this movie.
Yeah. I mean, if you look her up on IMDb, she has 169 movies.
Yeah, but a lot of that's like direct-to-video shit that came out too,
Hey, that's okay. Is she naked? It's still okay then.
Maybe.
There's no problem with
and
that.
I guarantee you she's still doing the conventions too, probably.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure she is.
If there's a Fango, there's a Linnea Quigley.
What about Tina? Did Tina ever do anything else? Because it seems like I've seen Miguel Nunez since then in something because he was so good.
When I saw his actor picture, he looked familiar. He's like a distinguished older. He looks like a black gentleman, but like I said, he's Puerto Rican.
Okay.
Very dark skinned.
Yeah.
Tina, I don't know what she's done. I can go into casting a little bit. I don't have a lot. If you want to start with Clu Gulager, the part was originally offered to Leslie Nielsen, which would have made it even funnier.
Oh my gosh.
Because I could just see it, him wrestling with that yellow cadaver.
I could see that, yeah.
Then it was offered to Robert Webber, who hated the script. And then they tried Scott Brady, who was too sick and actually died the following year. And then finally they went with Clu Gulager right before the first day of filming. So he just kind of walked into that part.
Yep.
And he owns it, man. He's great in it.
He is great in it. I like the fact that they let them have such liberty, I think, with some of the ad libs or everything else. I mean, there's a lot of language and profanity in the movie, just because it seems so realistic. They're all panicked for most of this movie.
Some of it even seems improv, like when they're excited and talking over each other. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, hit it in the head, man.
James Karen, excuse me.
Yes.
he was cast from day one. I mean, they didn't have any doubts about him. But he was from such a distinguished background. Did you read that he brought Jason Robards to the set one day?
No, but why would he do that?
I think that is hilarious. I mean, I was like, wow, can you imagine filming a zombie movie and Jason Robards is walking around on the set? That's just hilarious to me.
You have got to watch this documentary. Then you just reminded me. There's a scene when they're interviewing James Cairn. He's sitting there and he goes, because they're talking with, how did you get cast, or blah blah blah. Because they just talked about Clu and the fact that they basically just found him the day before, kind of thing. And they cut to James and he goes, well, yeah, I had to sleep with almost everybody on this entire project. And then there's a huge pause. He goes, no, I'm serious. I didn't do that. No, but
I mean, you can see his comic chops in the very opening when he's just telling the guy, when he's training the guy at the warehouse.
Oh, it's great.
Talking with him. Yeah.
Yeah. And just the way he talks and the way he said, the way he hits people with the clipboard and everything else. And it's just, yeah.
And did you read, there was jokes all over the set, like that eye chart that said Bert is a slave driver, Eddie something, I can't remember.
Yeah. In the background.
Yeah.
And it's like a 2-shot. So you definitely see it up center, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. If you want to go to the triumvirate, I guess you would say, of this mega talent trio, the other would be Don Calfa, who plays Ernie, the funeral home guy. And this guy, I don't know what the story was with him. Somehow Dan O'Bannon got it into his head that this guy was an escaped Nazi, but they never actually say that. You just see like Nazi propaganda in the background. Did you know that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like his gun is like a Nazi.
It's a Luger. Yeah. And when you first see him, he's putting the headphones on. He's listening to a German anthem.
Okay.
Listening to it,
It's so strange. And they made him dye his hair. He has dark hair and they made him dye his hair blonde.
Yeah. Well, and and this is in disagreement. It's in one of the documentaries, but it was kind of discounted in the other documentary. So I don't know if it's true. But according to Calfa, he's the one that actually put that idea in O'Bannon's head, because when they gave his full name is like Ernest,
very German. Yeah.
Something or other. Right. And he said,
all I have is Ernie. So I don't know.
He said, that's so-and-so. And O'Bannon went, who? And he goes, so-and-so. And it was this Nuremberg Nazi that got
Ernest von Hohmeyer.
That got executed and everything else. And so O'Bannon said, well, sure, maybe he's living here instead of Paraguay or whatever.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. And it was 85, so it wouldn't have been too far after World
War
II.
No. He is great. And we were quiet about him in all this casting, but he is great in this movie.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Got the bug eyes.
Yeah, he does. And speaking of which, there was one other guy considered for this part before Don got it. Do you want to guess who that is?
I just don't say Marty Feldman. What?
It's not Buscemi and it's not Marty Feldman. That's very funny.
Okay.
You're going to die when I tell you. It is Vincent Schiavelli.
Where do I know him from? I don't know that name.
He was in Cuckoo's Nest and said my head would squash like
an eggplant. Like an eggplant.
He was also married to Alice Beasley, who played Agnes DePesto on Moonlighting. He is no longer with us as well, but he was a character actor of the 80s and 90s.
I think Don Calfa does an awesome job in this.
I do too. And like I said, I don't have a qualm with anybody in this movie. Even the lesser ones, I don't have qualms with. I think everybody's perfectly cast in this movie.
Yeah.
We have a telephone ringing.
I need to stop that.
Hello, Johnny has the keys.
You've reached Johnny has the keys.
Okay, this is the Tim Show. Let's see if I can find you another picture. Let's give you something scary. Oh. oh, there is the tar man, as he was known as, the guy that was in the canister of the gases, and there's the half lady on the gurney that we mentioned was also used in Reanimator last season.
True. I'd forgotten that. That's
Yeah.
true. That was the same gurney.
Same gurney
with the
had a hole in
puppeteers.
it. They needed to use it. Back to casting. Thom Mathews played Freddy, the
Freddy.
kid that was hired to work with Frank at the medical warehouse. And Thom Mathews went on to star in several Friday the 13th movies. I think he was the adult version of the Corey Feldman kid that killed him in the fourth movie, something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah, something like that.
But he did a lot. He was definitely in Friday the 13th Part 6, which is one of my favorites. I know these numbers. Anyway, an interesting tidbit about him, and you're going to love this, is that he brought somebody very famous to the set too, because when he was young, his roommate was George Clooney. George Clooney was on this set as well as a kid, or, Thom Mathews' age.
Really?
Yeah.
So before St. Elsewhere, I'm sure. Or whatever
you mean
he was
ER,
on.
but yes.
ER,
yes.
yeah.
ER was the 90s. So yeah, it was before that.
Wow.
About 5 years.
Wow.
Fascinating, isn't it?
I did not
Jason
know that.
Robards and George Clooney were on this
pretty
set.
Fascinating.
I don't have anything else because mainly it's just the punks. I mean, I've got their names, but none of them were alternate casts because this is probably their first movie for most of them, I would say.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I didn't hear a lot about any of them afterwards. I mean, Nunez, I know I've seen on several things on television, and I've seen him before, but none of the other cast, other than Tom, I haven't seen anywhere else, really.
Nunez reminds me of the guy, and his name escapes me, but he played the villain in The Mandalorian. That's kind of what he looks like now. Older, distinguished, really short hair.
Yep.
And that guy's Hispanic too, I believe. Damn, I can't think of his name. So everyone out there, if I think of it, I'll put it in the show notes. But it's a very well-known actor. He was on Breaking Bad too as a bad guy. I can go to awards. This movie did not win many. However, in our Saturn Awards, it was a nominee for Best Horror, Best Actor, James Karen, Best Director, Dan O'Bannon, and Best Makeup, William Munns. It is not on the 1001 movies to see before you die, though. And
William Munns was hired because he was originally hired as like the secondary makeup guy. So he was doing stuff like the split dogs and some of the other prosthetic effects. And when they fired the head makeup guy, he then elevated. So he designed the old lady half corpse. He designed Tarman. He designed, all of those things were him. So no wonder he was nominated, because I mean, it does have some great effects.
I love how they cast Tarman. They cast a really skinny mime to play him, which made me think of you because you used to do that too.
I did.
And he looks skeletal when he walks, and he walks really funky. I mean, he's got a great zombie walk for sure.
Yeah. If it was going to be the whole, what's your zombie walk? He wins. He's got it. More brains.
I love that picture of him that's up behind me right now, because that's what he's saying, I think, when he's in that picture, more brains. But his teeth are like perfect. There's like shiny, white, perfect human teeth. They're not gross at all.
And and I think that was an homage back to the very beginning scene where he goes, we got to put these two female corpses in. They got to have, what PT stands for? Perfect teeth. Yeah. Did you know that the girl playing Tina didn't see him until he actually came out on film? They kept him hidden on the set from her so that they would get her actual reaction when she first saw that makeup and saw him come out.
Oh, that's
and
great.
So when they do that Spielberg shot of her and she's going, that's the first time she's seen him. I mean, the actor. So that was really cool. And that was a key for me. That was definitely a Jaws Spielberg shot when they do that forced zoom in.
Mm-hmm. Another thing we neglected to mention that I love is when we're talking about scenes is the fact that throughout this entire movie, Freddy and I keep forgetting his damn name,
Frank
get are getting sicker and turning into zombies.
Yes,
They're just turning into them slower because they were alive when they got exposed to the gas. And these paramedics come and take their vitals and they have none. Something's wrong with my stethoscope. I'm not getting a heartbeat here.
I'm not getting any blood pressure.
But one of my favorite lines is Freddy's when I think it's when he's banging on the ceiling or banging on a door or something, trying to get to his girlfriend. And he says, I know you're in there because I can smell your brains.
Yeah, you used to say that all the time.
You got to let me eat your brains. I love it. The zombie is actually emoting. Let me eat you, please.
Well, then also the conceit of this movie we didn't really touch on, which is basically the reason for all of this is that it's an army gas. It's an army chemical. Mm-hmm. What is it? 2,4,5-trioxin or something, but it not only reanimates the dead, it will slowly turn the living into zombies as well. So it's pretty freaking powerful. It also doesn't go away. So if you burn it and it turns into smoke, it can come back and rain into the ground. If you spray it on people, obviously it will hurt them.
Right. And another aspect of this
aerosol
movie that I love is that with the zombies of the Romero movies, they're either the dead that are around or the dead that become dead from being infected. You don't have people crawling out of the grave like you do in this movie. It's
they literally climb. Yes, very Tales of the Crypt. That's a great key because they do literally climb out of the ground.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that the suspense and one of the scare moments to me is when they first, I mean, we as an audience know the joke or know the gag before the cast does, of course, but they're banging on the coffins under the ground and you're hearing them and hearing them scream. I thought that was just really chilly and really great.
Right.
There is a concept of this one that's not in the Romeros, which is if you are bitten by one, you don't turn into one. You have to be exposed to the gas to turn into one.
Well, and I mean, none of them survive. They just get their brains eaten.
Well, that's what I mean. So like the paramedics that are eaten don't come back as zombies because they're eaten.
Right.
And they weren't exposed to the trioxin or whatever the gas is or the chemical. That is like that little, that's in the beginning, not the very beginning, but near the beginning of the movie. And then not again until the end. I think structurally that's an issue. But the army involvement, this general who is having a strange relationship with his wife because he's on 24/7 call. I know they're out there somewhere.
And
somebody's going to find them.
Looking worried, dressed like Pat Nixon.
Yeah.
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 When you talk about Dan O'Bannon being a first-time filmmaker, like some of the things that kind of keyed me into that, even though I still like the movie, is that it's a lot of observation from within. It's like they're looking out the windows and then you see, the paramedics or the cops pull up and then they get ambushed by a herd of zombies. And then they cut back to their reaction. They're just going to keep coming and keep getting killed, and shedding the thing. So, I mean, there's a lot of like, what would you call that? Dual perspective?
Yeah.
No?
Yep.
Yeah. It's
a lot
very,
of two perspective.
I guess amateur filmmaker or necessity, maybe.
And he doesn't use the frame for horror movie convention, which is both good and bad.
Right.
But like he a suspenseful scene like Tina having to leave the cemetery and walk over to the medical supply, and it's night now. Suddenly, it's night all of a sudden, but that's okay. But he does these huge overhead shots of her walking, as opposed to real tight shots on her, which most horror movies would do because we don't know what's going to jump out at her in this frame. Instead, we can see there's nobody near her. It doesn't matter. And it goes on forever.
Right. He does it from overhead. It's very strange.
And stuff like this movie. And I wanted to ask you if there's any keys that you remember. This movie has no horror hook. The whole first like 6 or 7 minutes are all them just going through the warehouse. See those are split dogs, right?
Well, there is I love that too, by the way. The fact that they would make those dog models come back to life is just insane.
And the butterflies moving on the board. That was great too.
Yeah. It basically was just the exposition needed to explain where the story was going.
And but normally in a horror movie, like even ones we've covered, like Basket Case and all that, there's a murder at the beginning or some creepy kind of hook. And then we settle down to the exposition and the characters and yada, yada.
Right.
This one does.
I made a mistake earlier. I was thinking the credits were when the smoke go up, but that's way too deep in the movie. What was the credits?
No, that is that's when the credits.
Is it?
Yes.
Because that was after they went all the way over to the funeral.
You have the scene. You have the scene. No. The credits are when the gas comes out. Think about
that's
it that
what
way.
I was thinking. Yeah, it's when the canister leaks and they all collapse. Yeah.
And Tarman is revealed and all of that.
Melting.
Melting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So to your point, no, it wasn't when the smoke went into the air, but it is when the gas was released. So you've got the whole scene with them saying goodbye to Bert and leaving him. You've got the whole split dog, and here's the skeletons, and they're from India, and da-da-da. Then we've got the whole, let's go into the office.
Oh, well, they go into the refrigerator too and look at the corpse on the hooks too. Yeah.
Corpse on the hook, who becomes Yellow Cadaver.
Right.
And then you've got the go into the office, and there's the eye chart. Now let's sit down. Let me tell you the whole story of Night of the Living Dead. That was all real, right? But they changed it. Typical army fuck up.
He's so good at that part.
And then there's that pause, and he goes, "You want to see them?"
Yeah,
they're down in the base.
Of course, I do.
Yeah. And again, typical army fuck up. Of course, the army naturally. I love O'Bannon's kind of, very
hippie.
Ironic twist ending of by eliminating the threat, they're actually making it 100 times worse because they nuke the city and then all of the stuff goes
into the air and
you see more rain. So
before we get into keys, did whatever that documentary was you're watching or watched, did Dan O'Bannon? Dan O'Bannon wasn't in the documentary.
Nope.
Oh, okay. I watched the commentary, which was Dan O'Bannon, because this was from like 2001. And he loves everybody in this movie. And he said, I will do anything to get the right shot. I come from that director's approach, whether it hurts somebody's feelings or they hate me.
Oh, yeah.
And he said that Clu Gulager punched him twice. Clocked him.
The stories that are in both different documentaries, they talk about Clu and Dan. And they talk about the fact that Clu came into this, with a lot of clout anyway. Right. And he was sure that Dan just didn't know what he was doing. He's a newbie and da-da-da-da. And some of that was kidding.
Yeah.
And some of that was taking advantage of him, kind of thing. But they have every single member of the cast talk about the day that Clu chased Dan around the set with the baseball bat.
Wow.
And the day that he threw something at Dan. Dan had just gone out the door and the door closed and the thing hit and shattered on the set wall and all of that. Then suddenly in one documentary, they cut to Clu and Clu goes, that is a total fabrication. I would never, that is unprofessional. I would never act like that. And I can't believe someone said that. But you couldn't tell in that if he was being serious or not. I mean, I couldn't tell. Is he just saying that because he did get busted and he really did it? Or is he saying it?
Because it works either way. He knows how to play it.
Yeah, but evidently they did not get along.
But Dan, to his credit, said, "I love Clu. He's great. Even though he punched me a couple times, I don't care because I got the movie I want."
But yeah, and from what I understand, he did a lot of newbie director stuff, but also old school manipulation director stuff. You know, like Linnea Quigley, he had leave naked, walking around the set. They didn't put a robe on her or whatever else. They left her naked at times so that she would be cold. So she would, you know, he intentionally made the water colder. So when it's raining for the 5 days, I think they said they shot all of that rain in the cemetery scenes, it was like freezing cold water too on all the cast.
And they were having to say, "It burns my skin."
Yeah. But they're wet the entire time and miserable and freezing and all of that. The cinematographer in both documentaries praised Dan O'Bannon and said just his choices were good. His lensing was good. His color was good. All that.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of blown away in the 80s by this movie and its special effects.
Yeah.
I thought its special effects were great, especially the woman and the tar man and even the cadaver that comes running out. I mean, there's a point where you see it's headless and it looks like a dummy. But other than that, it's really a naked man running around.
The scene, and you used to talk about it too, the scene with the ambulance when they come around the corner and all of a sudden it's the little no legs, no arm zombie thing runs and chases them. Oh my God.
It's a big key from the movie Freaks.
It was so Freaks to me. Yeah.
I was like, where did that one come from? And that is so strange. It was like a little guy with no legs and maybe short arms. I can't remember. He almost looked like a puppet, but it was a real person.
Yeah. And I thought it was art. He just came from silent running. And
Well, and he is literally eating out of the bowl of a skull, the brains. And Dan paid them more if they ate real brains because he had calf brains on set.
No, really? Seriously?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
and he even ate it to show them he would do it.
Well,
but from what I understand, it was like Chainsaw. After a day or two, everything was rank, and no one wanted it.
It was rank.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ugh, gross. All right, let's go key shopping here.
Okay.
We just mentioned Freaks, which was very. I mean, if you've ever seen the climax of the movie Freaks, that's shot in the rain with that. I guess you would say deformed person, handicapped person. Is right out of that movie.
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to think of what the word is. It's not handicapped. It's anyway. We won't go there. I don't want to offend anybody, but it is very, very freak-ish, which would be Todd Browning, the director. The films mentioned as references, I'm assuming by Dan O'Bannon, that inspired him with this movie are Invaders from Mars. Not sure where he got that. And I think Tobe Hooper went on to do that.
That's a remake. Yep.
Yeah. Alien, which of course he was directly involved with. His Girl Friday. Now I know where they got this. He said he wanted the comic timing to be like those kind of Cary Grant movies, the screwball comedies. And that's where the His Girl Friday comes from. The Birds, which I assume would be from the isolation maybe aspect.
No, probably the slowly gathering menace. You know, the bird starts out so kind of innocent, but then it gets worse and worse. Subtle. And then by the time it's there, you can't get away.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Star Wars, I don't know where that came from. Dark Star, which Dan O'Bannon did with John Carpenter, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
right.
That was their college movie. Yep.
Psycho, Vertigo, which are two Hitchcocks that we've already mentioned. Hitchcock, Jaws. Which, I don't know. It's like he's pulling all these out. Cutter's Way, The Terminator, and 2001.
Maybe he was just listing his favorite movies.
I think that's what it is. I think he's just like, you know what? This is my first movie, so I was inspired by all of these movies.
Yeah.
But I see relation to some, but not many.
No.
I mentioned Tales from the Crypt. A lot of this reminds me of an EC comic.
Oh gosh, yes. Design wise, everything, production design. Yeah.
So,
I mean, the half corpse girl could be an EC host. I mean, so much so.
well, that half corpse girl went on to inspire, and I've talked about this before on past episodes. Greg Nicotero loves to pay homage to zombies in The Walking Dead, and he will put a zombie in there that is very reminiscent of a zombie from a prior film, and he used that half lady in one of the Walking Dead episodes.
Yeah, well, isn't it in the pilot? Isn't that one of the first ones?
Well,
Rick
there
sees?
is one in the pilot that does that, but it doesn't look as much like this one as the one he used in a later episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
I mean,
he's
little
used half
subtle
ladies
things they
twice.
did, like even when she's talking and her tailbone is moving and hitting the table in the foreground, you know, and everything. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I've got, of course, Jaws and the Spielberg shot when Tina first sees Tarman.
That's it. That's why he had Jaws in there, because there is a Spielberg shot. The what do you call that?
It's a forced dolly shot. So you're
It's a dolly
zooming back as
zoom.
you're dollying in. So the
Right.
person stays there, but the whole background goes.
Or actually, I think you're moving back and zooming in, aren't you?
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
That is definitely Spielberg. So I'll give him that.
Let's see, what else do I have key wise? I have every single zombie movie since then, because everything has paid. Everything denotes back to this, whether you're defying this by going back to Romero zombies or not. But literally, so many zombie movies came from this approach. 28 Days Later,
World War Z,
all of the fast zombies, all of the
Dawn remake. Yeah.
Yeah, the Dawn remake. I would agree with that.
You haven't seen it, but yeah.
Yeah, I did. I saw the Dawn remake.
You told me you'd never seen it, and I said we should do it for a podcast episode.
Wait.
No, the one with Ving Rhames?
Oh,
and
no,
Sarah
I haven't
Polley?
seen that one. No,
Yeah. You need to see that.
I thought you were talking about the Night of the Living Dead remake. That's more.
Oh, yeah. You saw that. I have at least one more that we've already mentioned, in that two of the characters, even though they say this is not a coincidence, or they say this is a coincidence, I say it's not, that two of the characters are named Bert and Ernie.
Oh, yeah.
That is a direct Sesame Street reference if there ever was one. So.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And they say it's not, but yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
I've got, let me see. I've got, and it's kind of a reference. It's a key reference because it is to me, it was very Star Trek original series, but there was not a DVD of this movie. And the studio really wasn't going to make a DVD, but there was a huge fan campaign to get the DVD of this. And that's how it got created.
I wonder.
And I thought that's very original Star Trek of, save the series kind of thing. I challenged our listeners, if you think of a key from where a movie shows essentially the movie in a little, 3-minute sequence at the end of it, which reminded me for some reason of Stuart Gordon. I don't know why, but it reminded me of that whole Reanimator kind of feel. And maybe I've repressed one of his movies, like From Beyond or something, that might have had that in the credits or not. I don't know.
Well, I mean, we know that Reanimator is all animation with the psycho music, but I can't remember From Beyond.
But maybe one of the Stuart Gordon, for some reason, I don't know why. It may not have
funny.
Been.
I have a key as well that I can't really decipher. It's a feeling. But that scene that you talked about earlier, where they're banging on the coffin lids, and they do like kind of a Scotch angle through the cemetery, and it's a little blurry with rain. Yeah, is so Italian zombie to me. It
Very.
reminds me of like a Fulci movie or
Yes.
something from Italy. It does not look American to me at all. And I don't know how to describe it or what film it is.
Yeah,
It's
that's a
just a
very good
technique.
one. But that's great, that technique. Yeah, and O'Bannon does that again in that closing credit sequence to show that they're coming back after the explosion. He does that exact same shot and sound effects of them, that muffled screaming,
And then he shows the water dripping down into the
with the
coffin
water
with the
dripping
same
down
shoe.
again. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So he goes a
does.
repeat kind of cycle on it, which was pretty smart, I think, too. It was pretty good to say, "Yep, here we go again."
Well, and it's
of
also
thing.
economical because he didn't have to reshoot it. He could just
Right.
reuse it. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was going to ask you a challenge, Key. This movie ends pretty depressing.
It
Basically, except for the general and his wife, every single character we know dies in this movie.
Yeah, they get nuked. And
So
quite clearly the rest of the world's probably going to die in a week anyway.
So the only key for me was like, it's very Hamlet. It's very Shakespeare of, all the main characters are dead at the end of this movie.
That's a good one, actually.
But is there
Hamlet.
another horror movie that's like that ends so just depressing? I mean, even Evil Dead, I guess, maybe, because Evil Dead
Night of the
ends
Living
with
Dead.
Night of the Living Dead. Yeah, all the characters die in it. Yeah, because
And then not Tony, Dwayne Jones, Ben gets shot at the end. The main guy that survives all night gets killed by the white people.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's one of those. I mean, it's a. That was another thing that came out in the documentary too. Is the whole idea of Ernie having the gun on her. And that whole, and you even as an audience member know there's probably only one bullet left, and he's making the choice,
right?
Kind of thing, which was good. That was ad lib. That was not in the script. He did that on set.
I told you I watched the commentary, and they talked about that scene where Ernie's cutting his pajamas off. That was not scripted, and he said that Karen and like Clu are just improvising while he's doing that because they don't stop once they cut, they just keep going, and they just kept it.
And I've got that in my notes too. I love that because he's just sitting there and he just like takes forever, and he reaches and grabs the scissors and he's like trimming it, listening to him and everything. You're going, what does he do?
Right. I know, it's fantastic. I mean, that's why some of they're professionals. They've been doing it so long, they know what they're doing. And I bet you that some of those kids were just in awe, especially the guy that plays Freddy, Thom Mathews, because he was around them more. So, but anyway, I don't have anything else on this movie except
me either, other than watch
praise.
it. It is a lot. To me, this is a lot of fun movie too. It's chilly in a couple of places. It's not, to me, overly scary. It's got some great special effects.
We didn't talk that much about the music, but there's a lot of like punk rock music from the 80s. Or new wave-ish move, like that really creepy song they play when James Karen is crawling into the crematorium.
Another thing that came after the script was written, he didn't like his character because his character was supposed to essentially be
just turn into a zombie, I think, or something.
Yeah, they were supposed to see him outside and he was going to get resurrected, that kind of thing. Almost like the brother, Johnny, almost like Johnny from Johnny Has the Key, but he didn't like that. He said he didn't like his character going out that way. So he convinced O'Bannon to shoot the scene with him crawling in, taking the ring off, doing all that, which was great. It was a nice little emotional touch.
I thought so too. And the music in that scene's really good. It's some slow punk song.
Yeah.
And then the horrible effect to my right, that Dan, I thought it was an okay effect. Dan thought it was terrible. Of the skeleton that pops up out of the grave and its mouth opens and it goes, "Do you want to party?" That song. I mean, I associate that song with this movie.
Beastie Boys or whatever.
No, it's not. It's not the Beastie Boys. It's
it's that other punk band, right?
Yeah, it was long before the Beastie Boys. It was a good 5 or 10 years before the Beastie Boys. Yeah.
But yeah, I also saw in one of the other documentary I watched, the producer said the same thing. He hated that effect. That's one of the reasons why they ended up firing the makeup guy. That was his idea of a skeleton raising from the dead, and they hated that effect. I thought it looked fine.
It was okay. It reminded me a little bit of the cheap skeleton they used in Night of the Living Dead. I mean, not Night of the Living Dead. Nightmare on Elm Street, that they cut and put the blood coming up out of the bed. They originally filmed a skeleton coming up, and it looked really stupid.
Yep.
So it does look a little puppety, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't mind.
The last key I have was the scene where I guess Scuzz or whoever, the one that dies because he gets bitten by the half lady, reminded me of, of course, that's a Night of the Living Dead homage because you got all the arms coming through the boarded up window and all that. Mm-hmm. But it reminded me of Johnny Has the Keys because there was a character out there that attacked somebody in here. And in the original movie, he takes Barbara with him. But in this one, they at least pull Scuzz back in and he pulls her in with him kind of thing.
Yeah, and I was waiting for him to change, and he never does. Like you said, they don't change when they get bit.
Right. Although in the documentary, the second one I watched, his character, the actor says, my head was outside and it was raining, so I should have changed. And Dan really cheated me by not letting me come back.
Yeah. And he wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think a very accomplished movie for the horror oeuvre, and it should have been in there.
It should have been in last season because it is a somewhat horror comedy, which we did a bunch of last season. But
this is our first one this season.
Yeah, it's our first one this season. Episode 3 of season 4.
Season 4. Wow.
That's crazy.
But we're supposed to say thank you, and we always do say thank you to all you guys out there for listening and for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on your podcast platform of choice. Please subscribe. It helps us to keep doing this. So please subscribe. If you are interested in becoming a Patreon member, you can get some extra stuff. Not only extra stuff from Johnny Has the Keys, but a couple of other podcasts that we have that are only for our Patreon members. Tim has a book.
Some big news. Oh, the book.
Tim does have a book, and he wrote it, and it's good, and it's really good. And if you want to be scared, read his book. It's just
I don't have
scary.
The graphic.
But Tim has some
the
news.
Dead Next Door. It's on Amazon.
Yeah, Dead Next Door, Amazon. Get it. You want it.
I have some big news that I think it's funny because you clearly got a little piece of paper you're reading that off of now.
No, actually, I don't. I'm actually here. I'm doodling actually on this piece of paper.
Okay, but my big news is our next episode is our 100th episode.
Wow. We need to do something special for it. It needs to be special.
Yeah, I think we should have a very special movie. I think it should probably be a sci-fi horror hybrid, wouldn't you say? Maybe.
How many of those
by
are
a
there?
Classic, iconic director, maybe a movie that just kind of rejuvenated a franchise. I will go no further.
Go no further. If you can guess, let us know. We'll give you like a Patreon subscription or something.
Yeah.
It's
probably going to be a longer one. I imagine we'll have a lot to say about this one.
Oh, we will. I guarantee we will.
All right.
So thank you guys for listening. Tim, thank you for letting us do it.
I appreciate it.
Awesome.
I will see you next week.
Adieu.
Bye.
Do you want to party?
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.